In the second episode of our Madfrog podcasts, Claire talks to Andy Grays, CEO of the Guildhall Trust. In a wide-ranging interview, we hear about the challenges of running a major concert venue, its role within the community, Comic Con, and Andy's surprising cosplay choice, his dream acts and plans for the future of Portsmouth Guildhall. But we join them reminiscing about some 1980s smash hit movies.
The very first year I was working was when Back to the Future came out. We had it in the cinema. I was working for a company which had cinemas.
Yeah.
And it was the big hit. So it was 85 or 86. It shows you how old I am. But it was massive. We had Back to the Future. And I tell you what we had. Remember the Goonies?
Yes.
The same year with Back to the Future, we had the Goonies. I'm trying to think what else. I remember the cinema I worked at. We had what we called the £1 screen, where they'd throw any movie they thought wasn't going to succeed into that. And they threw this horror film in, A Nightmare on Elm Street, because the distributor had no faith in it, and of course it was the biggest hit. And as opposed to getting full price, they're having sell tickets for £1 for about a month or something.
I don't think I watched that until quite late on, because it was quite, I remember seeing parts of it and going, oh no.
We were very naughty, I remember, with the projectionists. We turned this, there's a part where I think one of the mother or the uncle gets sucked through the door frame or something, and there was this, and everybody would scream, so the projectionists would deliberately turn the sound up to maximum volume just to emphasise the effect, and everybody jumped off their shits.
It's not the same in cinemas now though, is it? Because it's not, you haven't got quite that control over it like you used to.
It's all digital. It's all digital.
Yeah. Okay, right. So welcome to Ep.2 of Madfrog's podcast, which is called Behind the Business. So today we're delighted to be here at the Portsmouth Guildhall with the CEO, Andy Grays. Thank you very much for taking time out to have a chat with us.
Pleasure.
So could you start by telling us who you are, introducing yourself, and what your role is here at the Guildhall?
Well, I'm Andy Grays. I'm the Chief Executive of the Guildhall Trust, which took over the running of the Guildhall in 2011. We have a long lease on the Guildhall, and I suppose my role is to keep the business together. I do quite a bit of programming. I know all my colleagues intensely through marketing, finance, and interfering as you do as a chief exec. Yeah. But generally, trying to ensure we're heading in the right direction strategically, and addressing all the challenges we've had.
Yes, so you've got quite a CV from the Apollo Leisure Group, Stolmos Theatres, Theatre Royal Drury Lane, the Luton Cultural Trust.
That's
so
right.
What made you decide to come to the Portsmouth Guildhall?
It's a good question. I think I was looking around for a while at a new challenge. I enjoy working in Luton. It was probably the first location where I really had to give some thought to working in a community which was very diverse, and the challenges of setting up a new arts centre and doing all the things that we did there. And certainly very proud. I was there for nearly 9 years. Prior to that, I'd worked in big buildings, concert halls, theatres, did West End. Yeah. And I was very interested in moving my own career forward to take on the next challenge. This came around. It meant moving the family from London, or just outside London, down to the south coast. But we all love the sea. Yeah. And we used to have a holiday home in Torquay, so this was an ideal sort of solution to moving us lock, stock and barrel to a really nice location.
Welcome to Portsmouth Guildhall.
And what's it like being working here over the last decade?
It's been the best part of my career. I've been very lucky. I've had some really interesting times, worked on some good shows, great people. But what makes you really buy into a venue such as the Guildhall is an emotional attachment. You want to do things, and you can't do that with every building. I've been lucky to do that with several great buildings over 30 years. But you have to develop an emotional attachment. You want to do it for the building, you want to do it for the community. Yeah. And so the Guildhall is you just walk into Guildhall Square and you go, wow. It takes your breath away. Yeah. And the history of the building and what it stands for. So I've been very proud to have been associated with the building now for 10 years. We call it a job, but actually it becomes much more than that, because the key thing for us is it's about creating things for people. It's devising things. It's allowing things to come in so people can enjoy themselves. It's working with young people. So there's a real sociable sense of what we do. And I suppose when you look at who we work with and who we, almost all our friendships come from the sector.
Could you tell us a bit about the relationship between the Guildhall and Portsmouth City Council? For example, they own the building and lease it to the trust, but you have to fund it almost exclusively yourselves. Yeah,
I mean, the City Council own a lot of assets around the city, theatres such as the King's. They own, obviously, their own museums, and they've obviously owned the Guildhall. The Guildhall was originally the town hall back in 1890 when it was first built, and it represented the grandeur of the city. I always think it's a bit like a great northern town hall down south because it's a status symbol.
Yeah.
And the relationship with the City Council is that they were looking for an organisation which was a not-for-profit to take it on back in 2010. They were putting a lot of money into the venue. And probably by then they realised that they were challenged with the investment going into both the building and into the revenue subsidy. So we took it off them. They helped set us up. And we've worked with them. We still get some subsidy and we certainly get investment from them as landlords. But we have to generate a lot of our own income. And nowadays we're probably generating at least sort of 80-85% of our revenue to survive, which, when you look at other concert halls around the country, it's some of them are certainly getting more than us, but some get less. And it's a sign of the times that you've got to diversify, you've got to make sense of such old buildings, and then they're not cheap to run.
So what are the main sources of funding that you receive? Is it from revenue from shows or donations?
It's all revenue from shows and conferencing. I think our business model back in 2012 was to maximise the income from shows, the money, the deals we do with the promoters, producers, secondary spend across the bars, food. But also we recognised we had to look at the building in a different light. That it wasn't just to be open in the evenings for the customers and community, we had to open it by day. The greatest asset for the building is its space.
Yeah.
So we set it up as a major conference and meeting centre, and it really does a lot of business with conferencing, meetings, weddings. And it's an all-consuming venue these days. So it's a bit of a hybrid between concert hall, conference centre, and we do a lot of work with young people. So we have a very active learning and participation program.
It's in a great location. I've been to quite a few networking events here, and it's very easy to get to from wherever you are.
It is wonderfully linked. With the station's 30 seconds. From here, and I always think Portsmouth is one of the easiest cities to actually get into the middle of, and therefore it makes sense for people to use it. I think architecturally it makes a real statement, and we've done some work through a project called Discovering the Guildhall, and I was at a workshop with some people from one of the local community centres about 18 months ago, and they were looking at photographs of the Guildhall. These were elderly people, and they were pointing out the kind of connection to the history of Portsmouth. You've got along the front of the Guildhall, symbols of sailing boats, elephants, the grandeur of the Victorian age when the building was being conceived and designed. So it really goes right back into the 19th century. I think it makes the city very unique in many senses. Yeah,
definitely. Obviously, with the pandemic and the lockdowns, it's been tough for everyone.
It was quite a shock for all of us. I joked with colleagues. I think the week before lockdown, I was at a major networking and conference event in London with all the leading promoters, all thinking, okay, we'll kind of get through this in the next 3 to 6 months and we'll be open again in the autumn of 2020. And it's going to be tough, but we'll get there. And of course, here we are a year later. But we were very lucky. We've always had good relationships with partners such as not just the City Council, but equally the university. So in the autumn of 2020, the university hired almost the whole venue for its use. And that helped us in terms of financially. We were hiring the building to them for student lectures and all the stuff that they wanted to use it for. So we were delighted with that. And we've been developing a relationship through them with the Royal Shakespeare Company. So back in spring this year, the Royal Shakespeare Company then hired several spaces to do a streamed event, which went out sort of nationally and internationally. And then equally the council have used it as a testing centre.
Yeah.
So it's been very good in that we've managed to find money, and we were lucky to get some money from the Arts Council for CRF funding. So it's not been the easiest of times.
No.
You know, our revenues, like everybody's, have been badly affected, but you know, we'll get by.
So many people focus on the negative impact that COVID has had on businesses, but from your perspective, what positives could you identify?
Well, I think first of all, within the team, we sadly had to make redundancies, but what it did was those who have stayed working with us, we're much tighter. I think we're much closer as a team.
Yeah.
I think we've shown some resilience. And, you know, I've come across other organisations just who looked at the bonding and how teamwork has worked. You know, we're probably mentally better prepared for business now.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that we can withstand quite a difficult time. I think you need to be challenged sometimes, and you know, those of us who've been around long enough have been through this, not this situation, but been through tough cycles. So I think we've worked as a team really well, and I think we've come out the other side. And I think perhaps we've understood what the mechanisms of our business really are, and what makes our business work. You know, the customers, the audiences, and the relationship with promoters and clients who use the venue. Those are fundamental.
After 15 months of lockdown, the Guildhall opened its doors for the first live performance on June the 9th, 2021, with comedian Daniel Sloss bringing excitement and some degree of trepidation to the evening.
It's great to be back out again. It's a little unusual, but definitely worth it. It's been a long drive from Brighton, but really, really happy to be here.
I've really missed all these places, and just coming to events, it really kind of feels quite nice again. Just to
be out.
Just to be out, just to be doing something, not be trapped indoors.
It was very weird standing close to people in the queue, I have to say, to get in, but it's lovely to be back out doing things socially.
It's lovely.
Oh, it's great.
We've just been at the pub.
Yeah.
And we're having a good time.
Pub for a few hours, lost for another couple of hours. You couldn't ask for anything more.
We had tickets booked for the June date when it was postponed here, but yeah, we're still really, really happy to be here. Very excited. Friday night out.
The Guildhall Trust have got some big plans for the building for the future, your Renaissance plans. Could you tell us a bit about those and how it would benefit not only the Guildhall but the shows, the promoters, the people of Portsmouth?
Guildhall Renaissance has been the key part of our work really for the last 4 to 5 years. It won't surprise customers that the building needs work doing to it. It was properly reopened in 1959, and since then the investment in terms of the interiors has been very limited. You know, so when you look at the carpets and the decor, it's a real challenge to do everything and be consistent and look at all the issues. So the challenge for us is to open up the Guildhall to not just look at, shall we say, what I call paint and decoration, but make better use of spaces. So the plans are to increase the size of the foyers, put new bars in those foyers so that there is better access to bars and to bigger bars, to enable better circulation so people can enjoy space before going to their seats, look at the dining facilities within the Guildhall, and inside the main concert hall to really look at new seating, new flooring. We've put some new flooring down, and we've done quite a bit of painting and decoration over the last year inside the main house. But it's really keeping it moving forward technically so that artists have a better experience, looking at the acoustic treatment inside the main concert hall so that orchestras can really enjoy a first-class experience. And I think our ambition is to really underline the Guildhall status as the best concert hall in the south of England. And there's no two ways about it. That's what we want. That's what we want for Portsmouth. That's what we want for the Guildhall Trust. And that's where we're going with it.
How can people get involved and help with the Renaissance plans? Because you're doing donations and sponsorships and that kind of thing, aren't you?
Yeah, I think corporates, companies, we would be delighted to have people sponsor us and come and talk to us about it. I think individual customers, if they really can help us through online donation, through whether they're buying tickets, just giving us a bit more money, or through on the website we have a donations page, it would be very much appreciated.
How influential do you think Portsmouth music history is?
Well, I think when you look around the music experience, it's run by a great group of volunteers, set up by them, I think, about 2013. And what we kind of have worked on with the guys is the Guildhall and Portsmouth does have a great music history. Quite surprising, actually, given the amount of people that live here, how many bands, artists have come from the area, have made their name here and moved on. The likes of Spike Edney, who started in Portsmouth, he's been with Queen for the last 30 plus years, and although he comes from the Isle of Wight, we do a lot of work with Mark King from Level 42. Joe Jackson, the Gosport lad, has been in here, and we have him coming to us next year. So there's a lot of connections with some really great people. And the history of the Guildhall, I mean, we know the Beatles and the Stones and the Who have all come through the Guildhall at one time or another, and we still have big artists come through. But it's those special moments that you kind of you reach for, and you say, okay, that happened, that's unique to the Guildhall. So we understand that Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon was performed in its entirety for the first time anywhere at Portsmouth Guildhall. Wow. I think it was the second date of their tour. The music experience tells that story. I think they played Brighton the first date, and if my memory is right from having read their own autobiography of the band, they played a few songs from Dark Side, and then they played the entire album on the second day. So that's one of the iconic albums of the 1970s and perhaps of all time. And you have other points of history which we like to touch on, and people's own experiences. So what we get from the history of a venue is that it's about the building, but it's about the people, and they can tell stories of when they've come in, they can reminisce, they connect to these buildings, and they talk about their sense of what they enjoyed and what they did. And I think that's where music is so special. It's not just about the product, it's about the experience and how it's influenced their lives.
You've got the memory room, haven't you, downstairs, where people can come in and leave their memories of Portsmouth and the Guildhall.
Yes, and we have people reminisce about it, and it's quite fascinating. You get some wonderful stories, and there are there's lovely stuff in the music experience. I mean, in just from this particular room, in 2 doors down, you have the history of the original Isle of Wight Festival. 68 to 70, and that's very special. That's the original promoter giving us a lot of his photographic stuff from that time, and the story of how it built to having Hendrix and the Doors kind of feature in the final festival of that particular era.
That's all the sort of formal questions. We've got some slightly more...
The quirky ones.
So, are you bringing Comic Con back for 2022?
We are bringing Comic Con back for 2022. Comic Con is very special to us as a team, because you could choose to do or produce any event in some respect, but Comic Con was something we all reached for. We felt a Comic Con was needed in the South Coast, something which we could enjoy and work with, and it's discovered a whole community in itself.
No, it's huge. Are you Team DC or Marvel?
I'm both.
Both.
I'm both. I have to say, I love the Marvel stuff on television. I watch it. I'm just trying to get through Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. still at the moment. I think I'm season 4 or whatever. But I like DC. I mean, who can't like Batman and Superman?
True. Yeah. So if you were to dress up for Comic Con, what would you come?
Most colleagues will say probably the Hulk would be. In fact, it's interesting when the characters you have on Netflix or Disney when you kind of sign in. My daughters have put me down as the Hulk, so I'm going to have to go with that. Bless them.
Brilliant.
Have you seen Thor Ragnarok?
Yeah, what a great film. What a great film. Yeah. But the best of the lot, I think, that one.
Taika Waititi. A really great film that he's done, if you haven't seen it, is Jojo Rabbit.
Yes. And definitely undervalued as a film when it came to Oscars. Jojo Rabbit. I thought it was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I loved it. Yeah. I loved it. Quite emotional.
Yeah, but I mean, the Jewish community use it as an educational tool.
Yeah. It is extraordinary. Fantastic film.
Could you just explain for the people that might be watching this that don't know what Comic Con is?
Yes.
Just explain what it is.
Yeah, so Comic Con is, in its purest sense, Comic Con is about comic collectors and comic artists and those involved purely with comics, the artistry, the history of comics going right back to the early Spider-Mans and Supermans and Captain Americas. So you look at Marvel and you look at DC. It's become much more than that over the last 20, 30 years. You've got the big San Diego Con, where you go in, you've got traders, you've got the celebrities involved with the films and the TV shows. And you also have a lot of element of reenactments and cosplay, and people dress up. And it's a fun event. I mean, if you come to Portsmouth Comic Con, the demographic is huge, from the sort of 2 or 3 year old putting on their Spider-Man costume to adults who create and dress up in Star Wars costumes and pay like £1,000 to have an official Star Wars Stormtrooper costume. It's a mark of I think somebody's interest, but also it's a community, I think. So Comic Con is quite special, and it's we pride ourselves that coming back to that term diversity. It's perhaps the most diverse activity we produce as an organisation because it's so inclusive and everybody. It doesn't we use the term geek, I think, sometimes when you look at comics, but actually we're all kind of geeky in that we like to watch and get into these things. It's like the whole fan experience following a group or a band or an artist. The same thing occurs with comics. We spoke about DC or Marvel or some of the more independent comics, and people can enjoy whatever they want with it, and it's a great day out.
How many people do you get through?
Well, I think the second year we had 6,500.
Wow.
So very busy.
Yeah.
Yes, we're very proud of Comic Con. It's one of those events which is the standout event for us because it defines our year amongst other things we do.
Yeah. Are there any artists or performers or shows that you would love to see at the Guildhall that you've not had before?
Well, that's a nice leading question for anybody into music who wants to. There's the unrealistic artists, the people that I'm a big fan of. I mean, I'm a huge Springsteen fan, so yes, I mean, I'd love to see.
Who doesn't love Springsteen?
Well, the thing is, one of the very first venues I worked at was the Manchester Apollo back in the 80s, and on the wall of the manager's office was photographs of him meeting every star who sold out. In those days, Springsteen played a 2,000-seat venue. And I know he's done Broadway recently. I think he's going back onto Broadway and, he'll play 2,000. But he is obviously an arena and stadium guy. But I'm a blues fan. I suppose, sadly, my favourite artist died a number of years ago, Stevie Ray Vaughan. I was lucky to see him at the Reading Festival. And tragically, he was killed in a plane crash. So looking to today's blues artists who kind of follow that kind of history, it'd be nice to see someone like Joe Bonamassa here. We have Robert Cray coming here next year, so I'm delighted. I was putting so much pressure on the promoter to get Robert Cray down here. I said, give us a proper blues man. Yeah. And I remember walking through Manchester Apollo back in '86, and I heard this album. It was Robert Cray, and I stopped at the sound desk and said, who the hell's that? That is fantastic. And I've been into Robert Cray ever since. So we actually have one of my favourites coming here next year.
Good. So on the flip side of that, are there any artists or performers or shows that you would not have back here? Not naming any names.
Without naming any names.
But that you would say point blank, no way are they coming back.
Well, that's a really interesting one because you don't. There might be individuals you think perhaps shouldn't be playing at the Guildhall because purely they wouldn't sell enough tickets.
Yeah.
And sometimes they think they should play here. It's a status symbol for them to play here, but if they can only sell 200 or 300 tickets, they should be going to the local theatres where it's appropriate for them, where they have a great atmosphere. So I suppose it's those who shouldn't play here are those that for whatever reason can't sell enough tickets. But it'd be wrong to kind of say there's a genre I wouldn't take. I mean, whilst we do dance, and river dance is absolutely fantastic, we've tried ballet on stage, and ballet you really do need to see the feet, and in a concert hall you can't always see the feet. It's not like the theatres, the Mayflower Theatre, where you've got a rate You've got rake seating and you can see everything. It's not designed for that. So a concert hall is appropriate really for concerts.
You do a lot of interviews. Are there any questions that you get fed up with answering?
Not at all. Not at all.
Or they ask you, oh, not again.
No, seriously, I don't, not at all.
Is there anything that you wish you'd been asked and hadn't ever been asked by the interviewer?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I suppose my most emotional experience in a venue, the one if you asked me to pick up one moment in time where I just got caught up because of what was happening. I was very lucky to work on the opening of Miss Saigon back in 1990 at Drury Lane. And it was a traumatic 3 or 4 months for all of us because the venue had to be ready and we had this big show, we had this big producer, he was the follow-up to Les Miserables, and all the media were there, international media were there. And the first 2 weeks of the previews there were problems. We had this big Ho Chi Minh statue, if you've ever seen it, which was being winched up and kept sort of falling down and the helicopter wouldn't land properly. And we were cancelling previews and it was getting really problematic. And we only had a small management team. And Cameron McIntosh was the producer. He was fantastic, but he was getting quite tense. And it got to the opening night and we had all the press in. And we had this audience and we'd been through some charity galas, but this was the one. And at the very end, I was lucky to stand. I was standing at the side of the circle just as the curtain came down. And in front of me was the producer, Cameron McIntosh, and a few management colleagues. And the audience just got up. And everybody had been crying their eyes out at the end of the show. And the audience just got up as one. And just that look on Cameron's face. And we had Bubel and Schomburg, the writers, standing with us as well. And everybody just the joy of just seeing this audience come up at the same time. Standing ovation, the cast on stage jumping for joy. You don't often see that.
No.
And you don't often have the opportunity to experience it as a theatre manager, because you do work on lots of wonderful shows, but you don't often get what I call the experience of a West End show opening of such major proportions.
Was the hair on the back of the neck sort of standing up, kind of?
Yes, and everybody was hugging each other because we could hug them, of course. You know,
Yeah.
we were allowed to. We were all hugging each other and congratulating each other. And I'm probably thinking back now and thinking, what the hell was I being congratulated for? You know, these are the guys who put £5 million into the show, and there I was just making sure people could get into their seats. But we did. You know, that was
That's important. If there's no audience, then there's no show, is there? Really?
Very true.
I used to work at the Royal Marines Museum down on the seafront at Eastney. And that's another very old building in Portsmouth.
Yes.
We used to have all kinds of bump in the night kind of activity going on, doors opening and shutting, footsteps, especially when we were doing weddings and events very late at night. I used to hate having to go up to the offices in the top of the building on my own. Have you ever had any similar experiences here, or is there anything that... Ghosts at
the Guildhall.
Yeah.
Well, I'm probably not the right person to ask, because normally when you get a sense of ghosts is the person who's locking up the venue at the end of the night and they're having to go from the front of house to backstage. And you know, this building, I'm sure, has its...
You haven't ever experienced anything. Have you ever in any of your other...
Yeah, oh God. Well, I think so. I think I was, I mentioned I worked at Drury Lane. There was always the talk there of Dan Leno, this old comedian, and being a ghost. And there was always a feeling as you came and walked across the stage of a presence. And I have to say, we had the most cynical fireman working for us. And he came running into my office one night, just before we were closing the building. And he said, "Who is the most cynical person you know?" And I said, "Well, it's you, Steve." He said, "I have seen Dan Leno. I've just walked into the Royal Room and I have seen this." And he described this character. I went, "Oh, yeah, who have you been drinking?
Yeah.
How much have you been drinking tonight?" And he went, "No, I'm telling you, Andy." And he was genuinely scared. And he was really, we had to sit him down. Actually, we had to give him a brandy. So I've certainly come across somebody who reckons they've seen a ghost, and I felt the presence, but I'm, who knows?
Yeah,
who knows?
It's we used to hear conversations. You couldn't quite hear them enough to know what they were talking about, but you could hear people's voices.
Yeah.
No, it was you're always sort of looking over your shoulder. Somebody following me.
Yeah, we had a situation where I was at the Lyric on Shaftesbury Avenue for a few years, and people still remember a few years before I started that the great actor Leonard Rossiter. Do you remember Rising Down?
Yes.
He died in the theatre.
Oh, really?
He was, he wasn't the easiest of people to get on with, and he'd done the first half of the show and was in his dressing room. And the company manager had knocked the door to sort of say 5 minutes, Mr. Roster, and didn't have a response, but he never responded. And they never dared to go in because he just, I'll be there when I'm there. And they were waiting on the stage for him, and he hadn't come back on stage. And eventually, after about 5 or 6 minutes, and the audience were restless, they went, and sadly, the guy had a heart attack and died. And we used to wonder whether Leonard was kind of talking to us backstage years later, warning us we better get everybody on stage in time for the second half because, the lesson learned, really.
Yeah. Do you prefer being behind the scenes, or have you ever, or would you ever get up on stage, perform?
Well, not to perform, no. I mean, I absolutely not. No. I've sadly had to evacuate theatres over the years, and nowadays other people in our organisation would do that, but I have had to stand on stage to say, ladies and gentlemen, can you, and then that's nerve-wracking, that's horrible. I can't imagine, why people do it for a living, really, but we certainly own our living out of it because they do.
No, it's, I think you definitely, you're either somebody that wants to be on stage and be in that spotlight, yes, or you're somebody that's, I prefer being... You see,
the funny thing is I'm reading at the moment Roger Daltrey's autobiography, and he talks about the drummer, Keith Moon, who, he was saying he would be violently sick.
Really?
Now that was part of the reason was he was on all sorts of things. And having a bottle of brandy before a show started probably didn't help. But he was a bag of nerves until he started playing the drums. And I know the stories of guitarists and singers are exact until they get up there. But they do go through it. They do go through a whole. You don't want to be knocking on a dressing room door 5 minutes before some of these artists or bands are on stage because they are just.
Really.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder why you do it, doesn't it? Yeah.
The moment it starts.
It's change.
It's the high from performance. Daltrey himself says I couldn't go to sleep. A couple of hours. I mean, I'm lucky if I got to sleep 4 o'clock in the morning. The high from that night's concert. I suppose that's the story for a lot of them.
Yeah. As you know, Madfrog, we partner the Guildhall to provide the on-screen content. Would you be able to explain why advertising on the Guildhall screens is a good way for local businesses to promote themselves?
I think what you've got is a lot of people in a very fixed location. We have nearly 200,000 people coming through that main concert hall every year. They are very clear and precise, and I think they are a wonderful way to really advertise on those screens. We have obviously forthcoming attractions, and there's local businesses advertising, and then during the interval as well.
It's quite a wide demographic of people as well, isn't it, that you get through.
You're getting people, certainly from at least an hour's drive time, who see the Guildhall as their concert hall. But we do get people coming from London and from even up north to follow their artists and bands. So you're getting a huge demographic who will have the opportunity of seeing your advert on those screens.
And finally, if you had an unlimited money pot, what would you like to do at the Guildhall?
Well, I suppose an unlimited money pot, you'd probably complete the Renaissance project like yesterday and create the greatest concert hall that you can. And that would mean obviously getting everything right in the venue, from space to environment, so that customers have every comfort. You'd want the artists to experience what they really must experience to have that live opportunity. And I suppose, if you're an endless pot of money, you'd pay what you wanted to who you wanted to get them on stage and to enjoy the experience. I mean, you asked me earlier, who, you'd look around the whole world and go, okay, there's some people who never come to the UK to perform. I mean, would you go and find bands like U2 who just don't perform this size of venue? But if money's not a problem, getting somebody like one of those bands who own a stadium or the Stones to come back into an intimate venue and did what they did at the beginning of their career, I think that would be magic. It would enable them to reconnect to their audience and to remember.
Well, they can see their audience, can't they? I mean, they're in a big stadium, you probably can see the first few rows, but way back, I mean, a lot of them are watching it on the big screens there, aren't they? Because they're that far away from the stage.
We spoke about Springsteen earlier. One of the things that he has always done is he's just turned up in a local bar in New Jersey and suddenly gone on stage. And of course, the great Robin Williams did that. In comedy terms, he would just want to keep sharp, and it wasn't just about the big theatres and whatever. He would just turn up at his local comedy store and just perform with some friends. And I think that just keeps you interested, I'd imagine, as an artist.
Yeah, you're getting more feedback as well, aren't you, from people?
Trying out new work and getting and really understanding how people respond to the new stuff you're writing. One of the challenges for Guildhall Trust as a charity has been to look at how we can engage people through beyond just putting on concerts. So we've done a lot of work in where you're sitting now, the Guildhall, the Portsmouth Music Experience, the guys who volunteer here, that, giving people access to do these projects, the opportunity to have people like the Skiffle Group to come in on a regular basis and perform in the studio, and to have young people of all ages kind of engage with them. I think it's about opening up access to the building itself, so that communities can come in, go and visit exhibitions. There's workshops, there's lessons that they can participate in. I mean, there's always more to be done. And then, of course, you've got the big events. We talked about Comic-Con, we do a Games Fest. So, having a sort of diverse offer, which allows people just to enjoy different things in a venue, which is fantastic.
Thank you ever so much, Andy.
Thank you very much for your time. It's brilliant. It's really good to meet and chat with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It just shows actually we're kind of getting back into the swing of things again.
It's nice to be able to get out and meet people face to face again, isn't it? It's all very well being on a Zoom meeting, but it's not the same.
I know, we'll be back there soon.
It will.
And thank you for all your support as well. It's really appreciated.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, both of you.
No, it's great.
Nice speaking to you both.
And you, thanks ever so much, Andy. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well.